Hi, everyone. So I'm Kurt. I lead the product team here at Orah, and I'm with Ronan, who I work with closely around the products we're about to show today.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, great to be here. So as Kurt mentioned, so I work closely with Kurt and many of the schools, hopefully many of the schools on this webinar. Just primarily I focus on a lot of the integration and general platform things, and Kurt is our expert on attendance. But as we've been focusing a lot on attendance over the last year or so, I guess we're both pretty qualified. So if you've got any questions as we go, be sure to just pop them in the question box, and we'll take them as they come up, and we'll also get into some more detailed questions at the end. So feel free to test us.
Awesome. Thanks, Ronan. So it looks like we've got a pretty good turnout today, which is great to see. So yeah, I'll just share my screen and we can kick on. Can you see that, Ronan?
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so just a little bit about Orah for those of you who are not aware. So we started in 2015, close to 10 years now. We work with over 300 schools around the world, primarily boarding schools, some of the top independent schools around the world, and we really focus on helping them meet and exceed their duty of care responsibilities. And by duty of care at Orah, we mean helping schools better account for their students, both physically and mentally, so that they can provide a more secure and supportive environment. So that was very important within the boarding school context, because you're pretty much a substitute parent for the students while they're away from home. But this idea of duty of care and accounting for students actually applies across the whole school, not just the boarding side. And that's what we've been working on for the last few years. So when we think about the different aspects of duty of care, there's three main categories that we focus on, which is attendance, being, and communications. And those categories answer pretty important questions that you need to know when you're looking after students. And the very basic but fundamental questions like, where are my students? Where are they? Do I actually have an understanding of where they are while they're under my care? How are they? How are they going? How are they feeling? How are they mentally and emotionally? And how do we communicate with them? Are we communicating appropriately? Do we have visibility on how staff are communicating with the students and that sort of thing? So these fundamental questions are, we believe, essential to providing the best in class duty of care. And that's what we focus on here at Orah. But today we're going to be mainly focused on this attendance side and better understanding where your students are. So more specifically, how we integrate with your existing student information system and how Orah syncs up with the data that you have within your SIS and how you configure Orah around your SIS. Orah sits on top of your SIS. We don't aim to replace it. We aim to complement it and just handle the attendance side, but keep all of your essential records within the SIS itself.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Kurt, that's really the big challenge, and maybe the next slide talks to that a little bit more. But the key challenge for schools is they do want to have more real-time insights and capability. But the challenge, and this is what we're digging into today, is how do you move forward? How do you actually move from your current platform without making a huge migration over to a completely new system? And that's what we're focusing on today.
Yeah. So some of the challenges that we see schools facing around attendance is that the current systems are clunky, hard to use, usually quite outdated and not optimized for the end user experience. And often there's multiple systems used to track where students are and for keeping account of attendance, which creates information silos so you don't get that full visibility and accuracy of records. There's a lot of manual data entry leading to lagging data or inaccurate data, and a lot of time and resources spent managing those processes. And ultimately, you don't have a real time understanding of where students are, and there's not a high level of confidence that your information that you have around attendance is accurate.
Yeah. I think the systems that a lot of schools are using at the moment were as good as you could get about 10 years ago. And since then, schools have been working hard to try and find ways to improve things and bring them into the more digital age that we're now living in by bolting on different apps, and been doing as good a job as you can. But the challenge there is that it becomes a little bit disjointed. The systems that you're using weren't really built for real time, and then you have this disjointed experience. And sort of just fundamentally, the tooling isn't what we need, isn't what parents like me expect. They want to use an app. They want to just be able to jump on and just fire something in. I'm sure the schools do too. But really, the core systems that you're using don't really cater to that. And just bolting on a few apps is better, but it's not. It leads to that disjointed experience.
Yeah, and another key thing to bear in mind is that these existing systems, they track attendance mainly for academic purposes to generate your transcripts. They weren't built to track attendance to understand where students are in real time for duty of care responsibilities. So it's quite a different type of system to address those two different problems. But the way that we approach it at Orah is that we handle the duty of care, real-time understanding where students are. And the almost like a side benefit of that is that you get accurate attendance records, which we feed back into the SIS so that you still have your accurate academic transcripts. So that's an important distinction when you think about attendance. Is this attendance for academics, or is this attendance for real-time student accounting? Because they can get confused sometimes when you think, but my SIS already does attendance. It probably does, but only for that specific use case. And I think that's why there's a lot of schools struggling with their existing systems and trying to achieve something that the system wasn't really built for. So we do have deep integrations with most of our SISs that we work with. But today we're just going to focus on one in particular, which is TAS, who's one of the major systems in Australia. And there are slight differences between the different systems depending on the API capabilities that we have available. So although we'll be using TAS as the main example, the other systems have similar capabilities. So just looking at the general setup of how Orah works with TAS. So we have an integration with the API where we'll be pulling over some of the core information from TAS either daily or hourly. And that's information that we need in order for Orah to operate as a primary attendance solution. So that's your timetables, things like that. But we'll go into that into the next slide. And so once we have that core information, then Orah is used as the primary attendance system where we're tracking your class attendance, managing absences, parent excuses, and on-campus check-ins, like if a student's at the health center or at a music lesson or something like that, where they might be excused from class while they're still on campus. So that would all be managed within Orah, and that's all real time. And then there's also a ability to export all of the information, attendance information housed within Orah, so that you can re-import them into TAS. And that might only happen once a term. Yeah, anything you'd add to that, Ronan?
Yes, I guess the key thing is moving to the key jump here for a school is to use Orah as your sort of day-to-day up to the minute source of information for attendance and student location. And then on one side, you're using your SIS to get all that core information in, as you said. And then on the other side is ensuring that that information goes back to your system of record, whether it be at the end of term, if that's what you need, and that's what the system capability of TAS is in particular. For another SIS, it might be within an hour or on a daily basis or even near real time. But we feel that the best way to manage things is to do all your day-to-day operations within Orah, knowing that information is still going to be in your system of record, your SIS as well.
Great. And just a little bit more detail onto the type of information that we send and receive from the SIS. So the core information that we're pulling from the API, that's your students, your contacts like parents or guardians, all of your staff and faculty, day houses in the case of TAS, your courses and timetables. So we're constantly syncing that information with the SIS. So then that gives us the primary building blocks that we need in Orah to do this next bit here, which is the class attendance, absences, excuses, location check-ins. And then when you get to exporting those records, that's in a CSV format, exporting absences and late records. And we'll go into a demo for how that looks as well.
Yeah, and so really, if it's extending this to other systems, then really what we need in terms of an integration is those key things. Obviously, student information. Contacts is important because we also want to put you on our parent request capability, so parents can actually create absence requests themselves if somebody's out sick and things like that, because we know that's a big time saver for schools as well. Staff, obviously, for the timetables and things like that. Quite a few pieces of information, but by and large, if your school information system does have an API, generally it has all of those things available for it as well.
Okay, so we'll give a demonstration of some of the key aspects of the system. So starting off with the core attendance management, which are made up in 3 key types of records. You've got absences, roll codes, and reasons. So we'll go into how these look from an end user perspective, as well as some of the settings and capabilities that you have to configure those. So while I'm still here on this page, I'm gonna talk to what it looks like from a teacher's perspective to take attendance. So I've just opened up our browser extension on the right-hand side here. And what schools would do is that they would install the browser extension on all the teacher devices. They'll set up SSO so that teachers can log in using their existing credentials. And what it means is that when a teacher wants to take attendance, they'll just pop open the browser extension like this, so it doesn't disrupt anything that they're currently doing within the classroom. And they can select on their class and simply go through a list of students to take attendance. And the 2 ways that we allow schools to keep track of students is using these roll codes here. So these are the options that a teacher or attendance manager can choose from to update a student's status on a per class level. And then we have these absences. So absences are a way of indicating that a student has been excused over an extended period of time, which could span multiple classes. So we can see here, Winton, he's got a planned absence. So as a teacher, I know he's been excused, so I don't need to mark him for this role. And we have some options where you can give teachers the ability to end these in case the student actually does show up to class. But that really depends on how different schools operate in their own procedures. So I think the key point here is these are the attendance codes and these are the absences, and this is what they look like from a teacher's perspective, because we'll be referring to these a little bit more in the other demos. Okay, so now that you have an idea of what it looks like from a teacher's perspective when they take attendance, I'm going to look into what it looks like to create an absence as a staff member. So this could be the attendance manager inputting it. That's pretty straightforward. So you would search the student, select the student, hit absence, and you'd have the different types of absences that you've set up. Typically, schools would have absent from school, like an all-day absence, a part-day absence, early departure, and late for school. Those are the typical categories that we see. And when you enter an absence, you would select a location. So in this case, it would be home. You can select the reason as well. And I'll circle back to reasons and how to set those up. And you can apply defaults to the different absence categories as well. In this case, I've defaulted it to a parent approved absence. And then you can also set the time frame. So if I'd said, I can backdate this one to the start of the school day, say 8 a.m. and have it to the end of the school day, 3 p.m. or 3:15. And so any classes that the student has between these two times will be excused. So now whenever a teacher takes attendance, they would see that this student has been excused, so they won't have to mark them during roll. So that's how it would look like from a staff member's perspective. But one of the key pain points at the moment is when parents want to excuse their child, which is what happens most of the time in the day school environment, right? So usually parents would email or call the school, and someone has to collect all that information and manually add it into the system. And usually that has a lag, so it's not, teachers don't have the most up-to-date information. So what we've done is streamlined it so that parents can submit excuses themselves. So this is a public link that you can share with your parents. They don't require an account, although there is a way to give parents accounts if you want to do that, if you want to give them access to the app. But the most simplest way to get parents started is just to give them access to this public link, which could be it could be on your website. You could just email it out to parents, or if you already have a parent app, you could embed the link into that app as well. And once parents come to this page, they just need to put in their email address, and we will send them a one-time password. And once they do that, they just input their code, and then that confirms that it's the actual parent who's doing this. And we'll show any students that the parent is connected to, and they can simply select the student and select the form or the absence type that they want to submit, fill out the information. Let's say if it's all day today. And that's it. So that's all parents have to do to be able to excuse their child from school. They don't have to call up the school or send emails. So it's much more streamlined. And we've seen that save a lot of time for someone who's usually inputting that information manually.
Yeah, and this sort of system is perfect for someone like me. You know, every term, one of the kids is going to be sick once, but we're probably only recording an absence request, so once a term. It doesn't really merit an app and remembering a password and username and things like that from a parent's perspective. Yeah, fingers crossed it's only once a term. This winter has probably been a couple of times a term that we've had to request absences. But by and large, you just want something low friction. You don't have to have the parent remember anything. You can have a link on your website, click that link, put in your email address, and away you go.
Yeah. Also, so that's how Orah would record absences and excuse students from class. So I just want to go into the settings and show you a little bit at the back end of how those can be configured. So these are the absence types that I've created, but you can create any number of absence types depending on how your school operates. Pretty much everything is customizable. And so you can restrict the different students who have access to this. Say if there's an absence form or type that only, say, senior students have access to, then you're able to apply those restrictions. You can capture more information. So the ones that we've been using just have the basic start and end time, reason, location, but you can add additional fields, checklist, file attachments, and things like that. The reasons, as I mentioned before, you can customize the reason. So the reason explains why. So the absence type gives you the general category, but reasons give you an additional layer so that you can explain exactly why students are absent. And if you're familiar with TAS, then the idea of reasons is quite essential to your attendance records. So every attendance record needs to have a reason associated with it so that you know why a student was absent. And that helps you with your downstream reporting and things like that. So yeah, if you're using TAS or if your SIS already has reasons, then you can replicate those reasons in Orah quite easily. And as I mentioned, you can set the default reason for your different absence types. You can also customize the workflows, whether or not parents have access to this form, whether or not it's being used on a kiosk, say if a student is checking into health center or if they're arriving to school late and there's a kiosk for them to check into, you can customize the workflows around the different types of absences as well. So that's the absence settings at a glance. And I just wanted to touch on the roll code settings as well. Before I showed you what it looked like from a teacher's perspective, and they had a list of roll codes that they could choose from, but you can create additional roll codes that have been locked so that only attendance administrators have access to those. So there's a way to block off any more nuanced or specific roll codes that only attendance managers should have access to, whereas the teachers might have access to the basic present, absent, tardy, or late. And also, as I mentioned, there's the ability to determine whether or not teachers should be able to end excuses during class. So you can turn that on and off. And the last thing I'd mention is that there's also an option to set up automatic reminders for incomplete roll checks. So if a teacher hasn't completed their roll on time, you can send out an automated reminder just to nudge them. Those are a couple of the settings within the roll options.
It's good. There's a couple of questions coming in, but I've been holding them back because I think they'll make a lot more sense to everybody as you roll forward just a little bit further. But yeah, just keep the questions coming, team, and we will get to them shortly. I just wanted to let Kurt show everything first, and then I think those questions will make a lot more sense.
Awesome. Thanks, Brennan. So yeah, I've covered the two main ways you would record absences, what roll codes look like from a teacher's perspective, how to customize those, and also the idea of reasons and applying reasons to both absences and roll codes. And so those are the three main records that you need to manage within Orah to get that understanding around attendance and to feed that back into your SIS. And one of the byproducts of having more accurate real-time attendance data is that you get better insights that you can take action on to improve attendance rates and follow up students who might be showing a negative pattern around attendance. And I'll just talk through the dashboard that we've created to help you do that. So when you start using Orah to collect the attendance information, we'll provide this dashboard outside of the box. And this gives you a pulse on your attendance rate, and you can filter by different student groups. You can filter by different timeframes. And yeah, it gives you an overview of your attendance rate depending on which students and which time frame you're looking at. You'll be able to see any hotspots of poor attendance on a per class or per grade level. And this just gives you the ability to drill a bit deeper to see if there's maybe there's an avoidance pattern around a particular class or particular year level that you need to unpack. There's also a way to see which students have the most unexcused absences. So this widget here shows you the top 10, but you're able to see more as well. And it just gives you an overview. In this example, in the last 12 weeks, we've got a student here who's had 23 absence records over 3 days. So that might be a point of intervention. It's just going through these different students. And what we see schools doing is that they set up a different dashboard for different student cohorts. And then often there's a dean who's responsible for those students who would just be focusing on that dashboard. And they'll give them their bird's eye view of which are the students that they need to follow up on and pay the most attention to. And yeah, we also highlight the most tardy or late students, as well as the most excused absent students. So it just gives you that overview of which students might need attention, which excuse types or absence types are being used the most. And you can also drill down into more detail on this table view here. So we can see students who have, at least one absent count or more than 0 within the given time frame. And you'll be able to drill down and see exactly which classes that those relate to. So it just makes it a lot easier for you to highlight and drill down and find students that, are missing class and be able to have conversations with them around what's going on and how you might be able to improve that attendance. So yeah, this has been quite a valuable addition we've seen schools adopt. And it's really a result of having that more accurate real-time information. So that's the attendance insights piece. And the last piece I wanted to cover is your attendance records and how an attendance manager or someone who's responsible for the attendance records would be able to clean and export those records to send them back to TAS.
Yes, perfect, Kurt. And this is a part where Sharifa was asking, can Orah generate a report for staff who've yet to take attendance? So I knew something was going to be coming up in this section.
Yeah, perfect. Yes, there is a way to see records that classes that have or have not had attendance taken. So we show different statuses. So we show the completed, in progress, and not started statuses. And so we can see here, we've got one completed, we've got one in progress. But if there's any that has not been started for a given day, you can select those and send them a reminder. And as I mentioned before, you can also set up automated reminders so that they're triggering without someone having to follow up. But you can always select on a particular record and send reminders as well. So we have a lot of features around reminding and nudging teachers to take attendance when they should.
Yes, so this is a perfect screen for an attendance manager. And in fact, I've been in a school which is taking roll and you see the list of the schedule and it's going green as staff work through that. So it updates in real time. So it's really just from my perspective, if I'm here as an attendance manager, I'm just watching for, okay, so this class was scheduled half an hour ago and the role still hasn't been completed. That's maybe when I follow up. Certainly in the early days as you're launching as well, just making sure that everybody's remembering to do it. But quite quickly, everybody gets into the habit, given that it's quite easy to do that particularly from the browser extension.
Yeah, absolutely. And that all contributes to having accurate records, is making sure that it's easy enough for teachers to take attendance and also they're being reminded to do it when they should. And so the other piece is giving attendance managers the ability to have that overall control and editing ability around records. So here we can see all of the attendance records on a per student basis for a particular day. And we can see that we have some absent records here, a late record, an excused absence or an explained absence. But an attendance manager can easily open up one of these records and edit the roll code, or they can also edit the reason. So as I mentioned before, the reason explains why. So we know a student was absent from class. Originally, the reason is not approved. So you might have a process where you follow up on any not approved absences because technically could be truancy or something like that. And so you have to find out why the student was not present in class. And then they might actually have a legitimate reason that wasn't known initially. And so you're able to change these statuses as well to ensure that you have the most accurate information. And here we have an explained absence. So we know the student was absent from class. They had an active excuse for absent from school. And so that's all good. And there's also the ability to filter by the different attendance codes and statuses as well. So if you have a follow-up process at the end of each day where you have to see which students were marked as absent, not approved, then you can easily filter by those different statuses and then just follow up on those students and to ensure that you've got accurate information for why students are missing class. So that's a few of the capabilities that you have around grooming your attendance records and filtering through them. And once you're happy with the information that you have around attendance, you can do an export, say once a term, to import that information back into, in this case, tasks. So we have an export functionality here, and we've got a template that's designed specifically for tasks. And you can choose the different categories that you want to export as well as the time range. And I'll just show you what that export looks like as well. Here's an example here. And the way that this export is designed is that it's pretty much just the exact format that you would need to re-import into tasks to keep your academic transcripts and tasks accurate. So we have all of the core information that you need, the absence type, which is coded, the reason code as well, the dates, the times, we also have the period code. And here, I don't have it in our test account, but we'd also have a period code, which TAS also needs, the staff member, any notes, the year level group. So this is all the language that TAS needs in order to ingest the attendance record so that when you generate your reports in TAS, it's as if you were taking attendance in TAS.
Yes, but bearing in mind that is just for TAS. For a lot of other SISs, you don't even have to see this. There is an API that kind of will send this data back if available. So this is just, you don't have a way for us to automatically send that information back, then that is the other option, which works pretty well as well. Because as we said, everything up to the real-time daily things are in Orah anyway. So just making sure that for your reporting periods in your SIS that you've got that information in as well.
Yep, exactly. So if you're using one of our other SIS partners like Blackboard or Veracross, you won't even have to do an export. It's just sent automatically through the API.
Yeah. And just while we're on that topic, Amanda, hey, Amanda had a question around Blackboard, specifically around changes to schedules, snow days, special schedules, things like that. Will they roll through? Yes, so we pull in the schedule on a nightly basis from Blackboard at the moment. Now, if there's changes, what we have found as we've been rolling this out is, yes, there are sometimes last minute changes we didn't anticipate. So we are putting in a manual sync. So if you just make a change and you want to rerun the sync, that's something we've learned is that not everything works perfectly on a planned basis in schools. So that is something that we will be catering to, as well as the ability to have that in place. Yeah. Perfect.
Yeah, I think that covers at a high level how Orah works around attendance and the relationship between the SIS. So we've got a number of schools adopting Orah as the primary attendance system, but still keeping their SIS as the main system of record. And through that setup, some of the benefits that we're seeing is an increased efficiency, so time saving and ease of use for their staff members, improved insights and data accuracy around attendance, improved parent communications, and improved safety through the real-time understanding and accounting of where students are on each day.
Yeah. Kurt, I've got two related questions I was saving towards the end as well. So we might maybe just go through those because I think they have some overlap there. Amanda was asking, sometimes they struggle with the standard things. And I hear you, Amanda, that standard things are pretty straightforward. You're in class, everything works fine. Independent study, free time blocks, and they need to check into the library or internships. So they have to leave camp for an internship and return. So that's one thing. And then the other related question from Sharifa, is it possible we can have NFC at each classroom where students can self-register and automatically update their attendance for that period? So there's a little bit of overlap there. Maybe we'll start with leaving for internships and things like that. Would you probably recommend passes for that, Kurt, so that they're marked away from their standard classes there and they have a location then set so that they're leaving at a certain time, they're due back at a certain time, and that pass is ended then when they're right back on campus?
Yeah, absolutely. So you'd use passes or absences, depends on your terminology. Those can be customized. And you can also set up recurring absences as well. So if they have an internship that happens at the same time each week, then they could just click over at the same time without someone having to manually enter that. And any classes that overlap with that period would show the student as excused.
Perfect. But if so that if there is enrolled as those as classes, so the internship is a class, then yeah, I guess there is no capability for somebody to, I suppose, for a student to self-record attendance. So yeah, so that might be something we need to dig into a little bit more. That's an interesting challenge for us to think through. But while we're thinking about that, the other thing I wanted to touch on was NFC and some of the use cases we've been seeing for NFC tiles, Kurt, in terms of attendance and where that's working.
Yeah, so we do have a number of schools using the NFC tiles more fluidly just to check into locations. We haven't yet applied the NFC tiles to class attendance, but we do have all the components to make that possible. The main thing that we need to do is be able to sync the locations over from the SIS and connect those with our Orah locations. It's all possible, and we have had a lot of interest in it. If there's any schools that want to help us develop that further, would be more than happy to work with you all to enable that sort of workflow. But what we found the most important thing is ensuring that the underlying data and workflows is accurate, because we see some other companies out there who are doing things like facial recognition, biometric fingerprint scanning, things like that. But it doesn't translate well, at least from what we've seen with other schools trying to adopt those tools, is that it hasn't translated well in terms of the underlying core attendance processes that schools operate on. So that's really important, is to ensure that you have that base data model working well and you can handle all the edge cases around students coming early, leaving early, being absent. And once you can manage all of those effectively, then we think the next step is applying the automations on top of that. Things like NFC or facial recognition would be the next step, and that's what we're working towards in the longer term.
Yes, but yeah, really streamlining how things currently operate and automating as much of how things currently operate is our first goal, because there's a huge amount of benefit in that. But totally agree with everybody who wants to dream big and really automate even more. And that's definitely part of our vision as to where we want to take this, because we do see a future state where a lot of this is automatically recorded. I think that does require, though, every school having a different vision as to how they see technology being used in the classroom, the different ways of recognizing individual students, things like that. Lots of different conversations and thoughts around, is facial recognition appropriate? Do we want to have devices in the classroom? Do we want to use different physical access cards? How do we want to identify students, which is much more specific to the schools? So very much a live conversation as to what we can do to help that. Perfect. I think we're almost at time. Really appreciate the questions. There is one quick one which I'll answer from Mitchell. Hey, Mitchell, about Synergetic, is whether or not we can export data back to Synergetic in real time. The answer, Mitchell, at the moment is no. That's because Synergetic, a big overhaul of the integration is planned. So definitely keen. I'll reach out to you after this and say hi and take you through what we're thinking, because we're definitely interested in working with some schools on Synergetic. It's on our list of ones to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Independent locations.
Perfect. And Amanda, thanks for your questions. I think we'll maybe follow up with some of those after this as well, because you've got some good ones, but conscious of time. So apologies we didn't get to all of those, but I definitely will follow up on them.
Perfect. And yep, just for anyone who's interested to reach out to us, you can email me at kurt@orah.com. And anything at all, if you want to explore new development ideas, potential, we love working with schools to further develop our product. Or if you want to set up a trial or set up a demo to get more understanding about how some of these features work, we'd love to hear from you. But we'll also send out a follow-up email after this with a recording of the session as well.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Ronan. We'll see you next time.